I can only tell you that there were contacts between the special services. I can tell you that there were no meetings with the President of Russia. That is all I can tell you on this subject. Naturally, President Putin is briefed on everything immediately.
Trump's first remarks on Ratcliffe's Russia trip as the Kremlin denies a meeting with Putin, raising fresh questions. Why was Trump's spy chief in Moscow? The US president finally speaks as questions grow over the secretive visit. Iran war, Russia-UK tensions. What did Ratcliffe discuss in Russia, as Moscow becomes a key diplomatic destination? Trump bears all on why the CIA sent its chief to Moscow secretly, as speculation swirls over the mission. Putin brutally rejects Trump's olive branch. Ratcliffe returns empty, as the Kremlin refuses to confirm a meeting. US President Donald Trump has finally addressed CIA Chief John Ratcliffe's visit to Moscow on August 25, amid growing speculation over the secretive trip. The US President spoke to the New York Post about why John Ratcliffe made the surprise visit to Moscow and what it was meant to achieve. Trump was asked whether Ratcliffe's visit was linked to ongoing Russia-UK tensions or whether the CIA chief discussed Iran-related issues. Trump hinted that Ratcliffe's Moscow visit instead revolved around efforts to reach a peace deal and end the Russia-Ukraine war. The US president said, and I quote, "Well, none of the above. He's there, on very sort of semi-routine. I hate to disappoint people. We would like to see the war with Ukraine end. That's a war that would have never started. If I were president, you wouldn't have had the war with Ukraine, and you wouldn't have had 25 million people coming into our country like they did. Just come in like we were a bunch of fools. It was so sad. John Ratcliffe is a fantastic guy. He's the head of the CIA, and he is not in there for any of the things that you said. Now something may come out, out of it. We're working very hard to get that war ended, and frankly, they both want to see it ended at this point." End quote. On August 25, CIA Director John Ratcliffe made a surprise visit to Moscow to meet with Russian intelligence officials, according to reports. Ratcliffe's visit marks the first known trip by a CIA chief since 2021, before the Russia-Ukraine war began and tensions dramatically escalated. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, on August 26, confirmed that Russian President Vladimir Putin did not meet with Ratcliffe during the visit.
Has Putin already been briefed on the outcome of the meeting with the CIA head John Ratcliffe? Were the results positive? Could you clarify what level of contact this involved? That is, did our SVR head, the FSB head, take part in the meetings?
All I can tell you is that there were contacts through the security services. I can tell you that there were no meetings with the Russian president. And that is all I can say on this matter. Of course, President Putin is briefed on everything immediately. Contacts through the special services are a positive development, a positive process. These contacts often continue even during the most difficult periods in bilateral relations. Our president also spoke about this. However, it is still too early to say to what extent this will affect the overall process of bringing our bilateral relations out of the deepest crisis in which they currently find themselves. Ratcliffe had no contacts with the Kremlin. I cannot tell you at this stage whether any further arrangements regarding contacts have been made. I cannot comment on matters concerning other agencies. As far as the Kremlin is concerned, no contacts are planned so far. It is beyond doubt that Ukraine is losing the conflict. The situation on the front lines clearly demonstrates this. That is the first point. It is also beyond doubt and equally obvious that former participants in the corruption scheme, having left office, are now beginning to denounce their former partners in corruption. Political, or, I would say, quasi-political, turmoil is taking place within the Kiev regime, and it is intensifying. The Kiev regime is crumbling from within. It is losing the stability that has always left much to be desired. And the fact that Europeans do not want to notice this is a grave mistake on their part.
Switzerland has acknowledged that there are no grounds for the release of frozen Russian assets. Could you please tell us whether the Kremlin sees any signs that Europeans are returning to the Russian interpretation of international law, and whether Switzerland's position could be the first step towards the unfreezing of our assets? You've sound.
Who acknowledged it? I just don't have that information. Who exactly did it?
It was the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs.
Here, we need to. To be honest, I'm not familiar with this decision or this statement, so I can't tell you anything.
Reports describe the trip as Ratcliffe's first publicly known official visit to Russia since taking charge of the CIA. Ratcliffe has maintained contact with Sergei Naryshkin, the head of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, or SVR. Naryshkin had earlier indicated that he was willing to meet Ratcliffe as contacts continued between the two intelligence services. Peskov said Ratcliffe's Moscow visit involved contacts between Russian and American security services. Ukraine was reportedly informed in advance that a US delegation would travel to Russia for talks. However, Kiev was reportedly not initially told that CIA Director John Ratcliffe will be part of the visiting American delegation. The United States reportedly asked Ukraine not to launch strikes on Moscow or St. Petersburg during Ratcliffe's visit. US envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were also expected to visit Ukraine this week, but their planned trip was postponed. A source denied earlier reports suggesting that intensified Russian attacks on Ukraine had caused the delay in the visit. The developments come as Washington and Moscow increasingly pursue direct bilateral contacts despite the continuing deadlock in peace negotiations. Amid tensions over the UK supplying Kiev with missile blueprints, Russia has issued a fresh warning over Britain's growing military support. A former Russian diplomat warned Britain that its drone factories could face the risk of attacks as support for Ukraine expands. Speaking to BBC Newsnight, former Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Fedorov reportedly made the claim amid rising tensions. Andrei Fedorov reportedly warned that unknown sources could attack UK drone hubs involved in producing weapons for Ukraine. Fedorov further claimed Putin is facing growing internal pressure to act against Britain swiftly as London deepens its support for Kiev. The Kremlin commentator also warned that a semi-military response could potentially be on the brink, raising fears of further escalation. The former Russian diplomat said, and I quote, "Sooner or later, there might be not only verbal, but maybe some visible reaction from Russia towards the UK. There are different discussions how it should look like. It might be so-called technical reaction, maybe some hackers attack from unknown source. Not from official level, of course. There might be different political steps, and I cannot exclude 100% that there might be some semi-military, for example. For example, something might happen with enterprises, with the factories which are producing drones for Ukraine, etc. They could be attacked, not by Russia, but by from unknown sources." End quote. Earlier, Russia warned that intelligence and targeting data was being gathered to destroy Ukrainian missile production sites, adding to Moscow's threats. Russia also accused Prime Minister Andy Burnham of putting the UK into direct confrontation with Moscow through deeper military support for Ukraine. The UK Prime Minister is also expected to discuss further Ukraine aid with Trump during his first visit to the United States. Russia has issued a fresh warning to Britain over its expanding military support for Ukraine, raising fears of a sharper confrontation. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Britain's growing role is further escalating the war, rather than helping create conditions for peace. Moscow claimed the UK's support could make any potential peace settlement with Ukraine even more difficult to achieve. Peskov also hit out at Britain for reportedly sharing classified missile technology with Ukraine, escalating Moscow's objections. The Kremlin said sharing Scalp missile data would add fuel to the fire, warning that Britain was deepening its involvement. Britain is also helping Ukraine build up its own long-range missile production, potentially reducing Kiev's reliance on foreign supplies. Peskov warned Russia could target facilities involved in Ukraine's missile program, raising the stakes over Britain's support.
Ukraine is attempting to strike at commercial trade infrastructure, thereby pursuing a wide variety of objectives. The Kiev regime is failing in this endeavor. Crucially, this prevents the Kiev regime from having any influence whatsoever on the dynamics that everyone is observing on the front lines. As for the strikes, they once again highlight the true nature of the Kiev regime. And here, of course, it is essential to recall the president's words, that they themselves opened Pandora's box, and now they must face the consequences. The people in Kiev are feeling the consequences every day, every night, and will continue to do so. In regards to support measures, as you have seen, the government is certainly monitoring this situation very closely. The government is considering and developing, together with representatives of the business community, various options for providing support in such a challenging situation. Extremely negative. Britain is involved in this war. It is involved in this war on the side of the Kiev regime. Britain is methodically and regularly adding fuel to the fire and methodically and regularly plotting schemes to prevent even the slightest progress in the peaceful settlement process. This is precisely what the United Kingdom is doing. Our armed forces are carrying out the necessary work, gathering the relevant intelligence to identify the production sites of such missiles and other military equipment, and taking measures to destroy these sites.
Upgrade your news experience with the all-new HT app. Download now.